الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. First, alhamdulillah, I'm glad to be here with you, and just so that we're clear, I am fully vaccinated. That's why I've chosen to go without the mask. So if there's any concern, you can't catch it from me, I can't catch it from you. Go ahead and begin. We're short on time because I was running late due in part to the storm that's going on outside. I wanted to talk the past week or so. I've had a series of conversations and engagements with either new Muslims or non-Muslims interested in learning about the deen, learning about the religion. So I've done a lot of introductory Islam conversations over the last 7 days. And one of the things that struck me about this, and Dr. Abul knows this because he and I both have served in the federal prison and speaking to the men there. And this is something one of my sheikhs taught me, Hafidhullah, may Allah preserve him. When you're teaching basics, the name itself gives it away, of course, basics. But one of the ironies of teaching basics is in order to teach basics, you have to have a deep and abiding understanding of them. So you yourself cannot have a basic understanding to properly convey the message and the meaning of those basics. Even when we're teaching children, sometimes we take it for granted that it's simply a matter of rote memorization or something along those lines. That's not the case. It is vitally important that we're able to go beyond the mere repetition of words and phrases and be able to deliver a deeper and more abiding message and a meaning that is able to settle into the hearts. So it requires a lot of things, not the least of which is understanding of those topics and of those terms. And if we're honest with ourselves, Most of us have not had the opportunity to really have that ability to gain that knowledge and that understanding. Many of us were taught in the same way that the children are taught now. We were taught through rote memorization. We were taught through it being crammed into our heads and us having to regurgitate it back. You can check that off on a list, but that's not real learning. That's not real growth. Spiritual growth requires understanding, requires acceptance. Conversion, and this is a long-standing conversation I have within the field of Dawa with others in this field. Too often, the concept of Dawa is treated as if it's an assembly line, as if all you need to do is get them to say La ilaha illallah, push a pamphlet in their hand, X, Y, Z, any of these boxes that you can check off so you can have this number on a spreadsheet to report as to what you've done, and this is Dawa. The 10-minute shahada, many of you might think that's a joke, but that's a real thing. There was a very popular video on YouTube from a few years back, the title of which was How to Give a 10-Minute Shahada. My philosophy and my advice to you is, if you're giving a 10-minute shahada, you're not accomplishing anything. Why do I say that? I've been teaching Islam for over a quarter century. 25 years of teaching Muslims and non-Muslims, young and old, men and women. And I'm telling you from experience that when I come in contact with those 10-minute shahadas, they're struggling to submit, they don't understand, their adherence or their attachment to the Muslim community is weak at best. Those 10-minute shahadas suffer more than they gain. That is not doing them any favors. That is only serving your spreadsheet, your report, your reputation, whatever. That is not Dawa. If you ask me, that is not Dawa. Dawa is calling to Allah. Dawa is someone having an understanding of the message of Islam and being given the choice to want to adhere to that, to want to accept that as their convictions, as their creed, as their manifesto, as the guidepost by which they will lead their life, and making that choice, and then you guiding them and helping them along that path. It is not, as I witnessed with my own eyes, talking to someone at a Dawa booth, and in 5 minutes, tricking them, and I literally mean tricking them, into saying the Shahada, and then counting that as a Muslim convert and taking pictures and posting it on social media and celebrating and making yourself look good. That is not Dawa. And personally, I would question the sincerity of the work of those sorts of things. Because that is not serving the person that you're converting, it's serving you. It's serving your reputation, it's serving your organization, and their bottom line. Bottom lines, reputation, self-interest have no place in Dawa, have no place in Deen. When I sit with these people, and so that you understand how I do these things and why I'm emphasizing this, I don't do one-on-one classes anymore. I've been teaching 25 years. I did lots of one-on-one classes. I don't do them anymore. What I do is I do one-on-one. They come to my office, they sit, we have a drink, we share some snacks, we sit and we have a conversation. What does that accomplish? I get to know the person I'm talking to. I get to know what they think. I get to know what they already believe. And I get to know what they need. Not everybody that comes to you is going to fit the nice little box that we want to put people in when we're giving Dawa. I'll give you a very quick example of this, and I know I'm very short on time. I might have given this example before. There was a Dawa booth taking place at one of the universities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I was there more in an advisory capacity. I was allowing the students to drive most of the conversations because I prefer to let them lead from the front and only be there as a fallback. And I was listening to a conversation that was taking place in front of me. A young white student was talking with one of the Muslim brothers, and they were launching into their canned Tawheed lecture. This is Islam, and why you should be Muslim, and all of these usual canned bullet points that most people are trained in when they're taught how to give dawah. 5 minutes into the conversation or so, the young man explains to him, I believe in the Greek gods. I don't believe in Christianity. All of the time he had just spent regurgitating this bullet list was wasted in effort. And to be perfectly frank, discredited him and the work that was being done because he didn't take the time to ask the question. It's not everyone you see that you're gonna find out is Christian or Jewish. They could be many things. You see me, you know me. I've been here before. I've been around the community. I take this off. Anybody that meets me, including the Muslim community, if they don't already know me, they are not going to assume I'm Muslim starting out. That is going to be one of the last things they assume. They would be wrong. Any more than with anybody else, you can't assume you know what they believe. You have to talk to them. You have to ask them questions. More importantly, you have to listen. If you don't listen to the answers that they're giving you, you'll never be able to respond to them in the way that works best for them. Because sometimes the simplest statement that somebody makes is all it takes to break through their barriers, break through their defenses, because you're paying attention to what they're saying. I had one example, and I'll finish with this, and then we'll start to wrap up. We were at a state fair. We had a booth at the state fair we had had for many years. Had a young man come up. Some of the other volunteers were already speaking to him, had been speaking to him for like 15 minutes. I got this, if you're talking that long to somebody and you feel like you haven't gained anywhere, you're doing something wrong. But they had been talking to him, they didn't feel like they were breaking through or anything else, etc. And so they asked me to come over. I came over, I talked to him. Within 3 minutes, had come to the understanding that this young man, he fully accepted the idea that God was one. That he was not a believer in the Trinity and things like that, etc. He had no problem with that concept at all. But then we started talking about the messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is where he had a problem. This is where he didn't understand. I told him very briefly, because I was literally walking out the door. I was done for the night. I was going home. My boys were standing next to me. And so I had this very quick conversation with him. Come to realize that where he is stuck at that moment is on messengers and prophets and their role. And so I got back in 3 minutes. I turned to them and I said, this is where you go with him. That was all it took. Because I actually asked him questions and listened to his responses and was able to chart the course forward instead of beating my head against the same wall over and over again. because I'm trying to go where I want to go with that conversation. That's not the way you give Dawa. So on the second half, we'll just have some brief reminders, and we'll finish because I know we've got like 5 minutes left, inshallah. It will no longer. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, so I know that there's only about 5 minutes left, so that we can keep everybody on schedule, even though I was not. So just as a reminder, some people say that the only reason you're supposed to be in this country is to give dawah. That might be a slight exaggeration of the truth, but if you are not practicing your deen in this country, then you have no reason being here. If you are in a circumstance, wherever you may be, and you feel you cannot practice your deen, then you don't belong there, and you need to go where you can. Now, ideally, yes, we should be sharing the message. But sharing the message doesn't mean necessarily pushing pamphlets in people's hands or preaching to them on a street corner or something like that, etc. Sharing the message of our religion is in being a good Muslim, is in being a good neighbor, is in being a good husband, being a good employee. There is much more that is accomplished through our being good examples of human beings who happen to believe in Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, than in the majority of our preaching, the majority of our pamphlet pushing, the majority of our 10-minute shahadas. And this is the thing, people don't want to hear this because this means they actually have to do some work. It's not a simple checkbox. They can go spend 30 minutes at a Dawa booth, hand out 15 Qurans and 50 pamphlets, and they're like, yeah, we did our part. What did you accomplish? Let's be honest, most of those, they wound up in the trash within 30 minutes. They wound up in the trash. Because if the people that you're talking to aren't the ones asking for the pamphlet or asking for the Quran, then you're pushing something in their hand that they don't want. And what do when somebody pushes a pamphlet in your hand? Even if it's as you're walking out of this masjid for a fundraiser, a restaurant, a business, a this or that or the other. Let's be honest, all of us, what do we do with it? And that's something that's related to our community, and we still do what we do with those pamphlets and brochures. These are people who don't necessarily want anything to do with us and our message, and we're still trying to push these things in our hands. If they choose to make it available to them, if they choose to take it, or if they ask for it, you can bet that person is going to read that. You can bet that they're going to have a genuine interest in learning more if they see something they like. You can bet that you are going to have a much higher chance of having an impact on that individual. And that comes by you just being a good person and having positive interactions and conversations with them when you're at the booth. I'll close with this. One of the things I teach all of my volunteers when it comes to being in these scenarios, I tell them, I said, if you never say a word about Islam, but you have positive conversations and interactions with people at that booth, you've done a lot. You've potentially changed that person's entire outlook on Islam and Muslims simply because they had a positive interaction with somebody who's visibly Muslim. There's no secret that if you're standing next to a Dawa booth, you're Muslim, you're there to talk about religion. And so if you have a positive interaction with someone and you never really explicitly talk about religion, they still remember that Muslim that I spoke to, they were such nice people. They treated me so respectfully. It might not seem like much, but those small victories are the ones that lead to winning the war. Allahu ta'ala. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي والمؤمنين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة. Alhamdulillah, right on time.